Hamas officials have told the BBC the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal does not meet the group's demands. The deal had been put forward by the US and approved by Israel. The plan sought a 60-day pause in fighting in exchange for the release of up to 10 living hostages held by Hamas. But it would have allowed Israeli troops to stay in Gaza, and it did not contain provisions for ending the war for good. It also didn't include an agreement from Israel to allow hundreds of trucks of aid into Gaza daily, something that had been included in the last ceasefire. While Hamas deems the latest proposals unsatisfactory, it is understood the group is still discussing details with international mediators. At the end of the last ceasefire, Benjamin Netanyahu imposed an 11-week-long blockade on all aid entering Gaza. While Israel is now letting some aid in, it's still far less than the amount aid groups say is needed. Tom Fletcher, the UN official responsible for humanitarian aid, has told the BBC that Israel's blockade amounts to a policy of forced starvation and that the world has a responsibility to take greater action to get aid in. He was speaking to our special correspondent, Fergal Keane.
The chaos and the pity. The desperation that is the legacy when aid is blocked. Today, the UN's Chief of Humanitarian Affairs, a former British diplomat, told me Israel had forcibly starved Gaza.
So out loud, Israeli ministers have been saying that they want the population of Gaza to be relocated.
Is that ethnic cleansing?
It's the forced removal of a population.
Ethnic cleansing.
And in this case, by withholding of aid. Now, again, the courts will judge what to call that, and I have to pick my words very, very carefully. I'm a humanitarian, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician.
To be clear, what we are seeing is the forced starvation of the population.
We're seeing food sat on the borders and not being allowed in when there is a population on the other side of the border that is starving. And we're hearing Israeli ministers say that is to put pressure on the population of Gaza. Now, we just want to work. We have a plan to deliver, we just want to get in.
That's a war crime, isn't it? If you use food as a weapon?
Yeah, it is classified as a war crime. Obviously, these are issues for the courts to take the judgment on, and ultimately for history to take a judgment on. As a humanitarian, my interest is just in getting as much of that aid in as possible, as quickly as possible.
Israel has claimed that Hamas steals food aid, and it accuses the UN of acting like a mafia by refusing to cooperate with Israel's military-organised aid distribution centres. Well, the Israelis say they have to do it their way because Hamas is stealing the aid.
There's very, very little stealing of aid by Hamas. Now, is some of that aid then getting to market and being stolen by Hamas from market or bought in market? Now, there's always a risk of that. In such a complex, contested, militarized environment, I don't want to see any of that aid getting to Hamas. That matters to us because these are our principles: neutral, impartiality, independent. So it's in our interest to stop that aid getting to Hamas and ensure it gets to civilians.
Mr. Fletcher visited Gaza in February while there was still a ceasefire. In recent days, he's come under criticism for stating that 14,000 babies would die in 48 hours because of the blockade, a claim the UN has retracted. Didn't you damage your own case when you talked about 14,000 babies dying within 48 hours? Pretty big gaffe.
I think we've got to be very, very careful with our numbers. We've got to be precise, and that's a lesson that I've learned in the last couple of weeks.
Are you sorry for that?
I regret that I used the 48 hours because in reality, those deaths will take place over a longer time, but they are at risk.
Because when people take that, and along with the statement about thousands of trucks lined up on the border not being able to get in, the risk is looking like a hype merchant.
There is that risk, and there is a risk, when we're out there using these big numbers, and they are overwhelming numbers. We've got provisions to fill 10,000 trucks and get them in. That can feed everyone in Gaza, all the civilians, for several months. And that's the real point here.
Mr. Fletcher drew international attention when, 2 weeks ago, he appealed to the UN Security Council to act to prevent genocide in Gaza, a statement Israel attacked as support for Hamas. But how will history judge how the world responded to the Gaza crisis?
History will judge us. I think that history will be tough in the way it judges us, and it must be. When I went to the Security Council, I chose my words very, very carefully, and I'm choosing them again carefully now. I wanted to issue a warning to the Security Council that in previous cases, Rwanda Srebrenica, Sri Lanka. The world had told us afterwards that we didn't act in time, that we didn't sound the warning and ask that the world respond to prevent genocide. And that's my call to the Security Council and to the world right now. Will you act to prevent genocide? It's been announced in advance. We can't say we didn't know what was happening. And all I'm asking is for the international community to be able to say, tell them, we did what we could. That's what we're trying to do. And nothing we get thrown at us will stop us doing that.
In the ruins of Gaza, the hunger, the fear, the trauma, the anguish too of Israel's hostages. 601 days of suffering for all in Gaza, and more coming. Fergal Keane, BBC News, The Hague.